thanks for coming. So we kind of decided that we were going to focus on ubiquity versus utility, because that's kind of achieving that balance between the two is kind of what's so important in mobile. Kind of with the Facebook phone, Mark Zuckerberg said, in emerging markets, there's going to be this entire generation of people that kind of skip past the desktop and laptop kind of computing experience, and their first interface with the internet is going to be from a mobile device. And with mobile devices being the most quickly adopted consumer electronic product in the history of mankind, it provides us a certain sense of ubiquity in terms of media serving that's never been allowed before. But people are finicky about how they want to be reached on their mobile phones. And what's important is that you provide them utility. So for our panel today, starting with my immediate left, we have Ed Martin, the Director of Mobile Marketing at the Hershey Company. To his left, Patrick Moorhead, VP of Mobile at Catalina Marketing. Jonathan Stephen, Head of Mobile and Emerging Technologies at JetBlue. And Jade Watts, VP Group Digital Media Director at MEDIANOW. So I guess just to kind of start things off, John, I wanted to start with you. How did you kind of have to rethink JetBlue's brand, its kind of marketing strategy as to fit the mobile web? What were kind of the challenges and what was kind of that thought process like?
Jump right into it. Warm up a little bit. So I think for us, So I think for us, what was really important was just taking a step back and thinking about the customer experience when it comes to travel. And it was very important that from a product and services perspective that we maintain our brand and we ultimately provide these products and services for our customers through the mobile channel. So when we look back at some of the things that customers would particularly need, such as flight status, booking, and just being able to have that information in the palm of your hands, it could be as simple as just placing that on a mobile website, or perhaps, well, taking a step back, we wanted to have that mobile website to make sure it was optimized for the users. But something else that was important was, could we maintain our brand image? Could you tell that you're on a JetBlue mobile website when you're actually on our site? So it was very important for us to have some of those elements on the screen that felt very JetBlue-esque. And when you look at the desktop versus the mobile website, you can see the connection between the two properties. So we didn't look at mobile in a silo. We definitely looked at all of our digital channels. And when it came to moving things from the website to the mobile site, we didn't move everything over. We just moved what was relevant to our customers.
So did your kind of web presence kind of inform how you guys were going to execute on mobile, or was it vice versa?
Well, it was definitely the web first. Most businesses are web first. We've been around for about 13 years, so we were one of the first airlines to really push the web piece. But that being said, it's a fair exercise to maintain consistency across the channels. We don't want our customers to go to the website and all of a sudden go to the mobile website and realize things are just a bit disconnected. So it's very important to continually look at how we're lining up all of our digital products.
I'm kind of curious, what kind of personalization do you guys use for Hershey? How does that kind of manifest itself? What data points are you looking at, and how are you trying to contextualize for groups of people or individuals?
Yeah, I mean, right now, we started similarly to JetBlue. I think everybody on that space we were originally contextualized via what kind of digital outlay that we would put out there, similar to what you'd look at in terms of TV channels, right? So we would buy digital, paid media. We organically grew with our social media because our brands are fairly well-known brands. You've got Hershey Kisses and Kit Kats and Reese and Hershey Bar, so we didn't have to do a whole heck of a lot but put a Facebook page up, and then people just showed up to it. And then like a lot of brands, we said, well, okay, now that they've showed up to it, we had this whole conversation around what's a Facebook brand work. That was a couple of years ago, right? And I think we've come to the point like, well, basically nothing unless you do something with them, because they probably were fans before. They didn't just turn into a fan when they showed up at your Facebook page. So we try to contextualize it based on brand from the social media side, which is also obviously heavily via mobile on the social media piece as well. So we're trying to take everything that we know about their media consumption, behaviors, habits, attitudes, and then overlay it with purchase behavior that we might be able to get from loyalty cards from the store or Catalina type information, and put all that together in a situation where when they actually walk into a particular store, And this store, as an example, might have geofencing. Well, I know Ed Martin, for the last 3 years, has done A, B, C, and D. His purchase habits are this. His attitude, media consumption is that. I'm going to serve him up that specific message and or value proposition because it's going to make him much more likely to pick up my brand new Kit Kat minis or something like that. So we're trying to really pull all the data that we have on the consumer already and try to put it into a format and a context where I can one-to-one, which is kind of the ideal world in marketing, right? You have a one-to-one opportunity, and with mobile, you have that now. Now, how you put all that, smash all the stuff together, not easy. And so we're still in the midst of trying to figure all that out, but that's the end goal.
I was curious if you could just kind of explain how your technology really works. I mean, so much of mobile is technical when you have so many different devices, so many different ad units,
Sure.
so many different ways of tracking and kind of personalizing.
Sure.
In the most understandable way possible.
Sure. So Catalina, if you're not familiar, we operate the world's largest database of basket level transaction data. We are installed in 30,000 grocery stores across the U.S. And when I say installed, I mean our technology is actually embedded into the point of sale at the grocery store. So our largest media network is our in-store media hub network, which you've probably experienced at one point in your life as a printed communication that comes out of a separate printer, not the receipt, post-transaction. And if you look closely at those communications, they are targeted to you individually based on what's in your basket at that transaction, or if you're shopping with a frequent shopper card, that gives us access to about 200 million individual shopper IDs, past purchase history over 3 years. And so we have a really robust database in that sense that allows us to do some really kind of incredible things in terms of targeting, so we can identify opportunities for brands to switch segments that are buying other products in the category, remove category buyers across, or tell you things like when your product winds up in a shopping basket, what are the other things in that shopping basket typically, with what frequency, what's the size of that basket. So we leverage that data then to, what we're doing now is diversifying that data outside of our in-store media network to a couple of other places. So online display and mobile display advertising via buyer vision allows us to now take that past purchase behavior at the household level and use that as a targeting mechanism for display advertising on publisher properties and in applications. And then our m-commerce channel solution is actually a scan and bag solution that uses the camera phone as the inventory collection mechanism in the store, right? So I order my water, I'm going to scan the water UPC with my phone. It's going to be added to my basket on my phone, and then it's an Uber-style, frictionless checkout. So faster than self-checkout, where you still have to unpack your basket and repackage it, is mobile self-checkout, where you've packed your basket through the store, and now then you just pay and go. And so inside all of those channels, the idea is that the purchase database is the best indicator of future buying behavior, better than demographics or geographic location or any of that. And we've researched that shows that 2% of shoppers contribute 80% of volume to brands most of the time. So there's a very narrow window of people that matter when you look at buying behavior, and yet demographic advertising spreads dollars all over it. So our idea is to use purchase behavior as the leading indicator of what people will do, and then use the media channels that we have available to kind of move the knobs and dials around based on their history.
Gotcha. There's a test on that later, so I hope you guys got all that. I'm curious, when you're going this deeply into kind of people's personal information, what are kind of the privacy concerns? How do you kind of retain that balance between kind of collecting this data and also being judicious about how mobile people want reach and what kind of data they want collected?
So again, for Catalina, we collect 0 PII. So the only way that we know.
Can you PII? Can you?
Personally identifiable information. That people in privacy will know that. All we see is 300 million shopper IDs. So whether that's a basket linked to a credit card number, or whether that's a frequent shopper club card, that's all we know. We don't know your name, we don't know address, none of that stuff, and that's why we don't work in demographics. We work in purchase behavior as the indicator of behavior. So we have very little privacy concerns, and our consumers obviously, nobody wants to pay full price, so everybody signs up for frequent shopper cards so they don't have to, and that's the value exchange of, hey, I'll give you this little snippet of information in exchange for, potentially a lifetime of deals and offers for brands that I provide.
There's one thing I want to add to that also, when you think about privacy, just from a general sense, from a brand side, when you think about your friends, or I'll give you a better example, if somebody off the street were to walk up to you and say, hey, can I have your social security number? And you say, this is really weird. But if your spouse comes to you and says, hey, can I have your social security number? I'm sure you give it to them. The reason why is because there's a level of trust. So when you think about building that trust with your customers, they're okay to share some of that information with you because they know that they're going to give you that better experience. So I think it's a balance of tracking that information, but also building the confidence in your customers that you're not selling that information, but that you're delivering a better product to them.
Don't give them your social security number. Public service announcement.
I just want to ask kind of one quick question before we open up to the audience. The spending on mobile still kind of lags behind the amount of consumption, and I kind of want to just start with Jade and then work our way down. What is kind of that piece that's missing that kind of needs to be brought into kind of the mobile ecosystem to
Can
kind
I
of
answer this for Jade?
Please, yeah.
Measurability. That's the big thing, measurability.
Mhm.
So mobile needs to become a more accountable channel, similar to what display is today. And it's been lagging in the last few years. We've all heard, this is the year of mobile, this is the year of mobile. It's not going to be the year of mobile until we really figure out that measurement piece. That's critical. Once we see that, then advertisers will feel more comfortable to push more dollars toward mobile.
John, would you like to speak to that?
No, I completely agree. And so, being transparent, we're looking at ways which we can make our agency more successful with mobile campaigns by looking at our products, making sure we have the proper measurement tools in there, and closely working with them because we feel that the engagement feedback that we get from our customers will in turn go back to the product side and see how we can improve those products to continue. It's not just about the advertising side or just building visibility to the brand, but it's also what can we do to improve the actual product itself. So it all comes full circle, and measurability is really ultimate for us when we look at not just mobile, but all the channels as well.
So I have a little contrarian point of view here. I think it's unrealistic for advertisers and agency people to expect that some magic silver bullet is going to solve the measurement problem in mobile without dollars to learn with. Okay, so we're hitting a critical mass point where we're getting to 25–30% of consumer time spent with mobile, and yet only 1% of marketer budgets are allocated to the channel. And that underfunding is what's causing the measurement problem. It's not that mobile is not measurable. Mobile is extremely measurable, but when the only funding that's coming in is for dating sites and crappy, third-party software, what are we really able to measure in there? So I think maybe it's a chicken and egg thing, so here's a breakthrough. And I would say that 2013, at least for CPG, is the year of mobile. And that is because I think CPG companies are quickly realizing that this is becoming table stakes in terms of communicating with consumers, and no one wants to get stuck on the sideline in terms of learning and expertise. So you've seen, Ed and his company starting to weigh in a little more heavily on mobile. You've seen, Bonner Bow at Mobilease say, we will spend 10% of our marketing dollars in mobile going forward. You've seen Keith Weed, the CMO of Unilever, say, Unilever will win in mobile in 2013, period. That's his charter for the marketing organization. So at least in CPG, I think the measurement problem is not preventing the massive influx of dollars, which is why you see eMarketer revising their forecast. Because we're starting to at least calibrate that sector to say, the only way you're going to understand how to measure is to do it. You can't sit around and wait for someone to come and hand you something that's going to say, here's how you measure mobile, and then you say, okay, great, now I can spend $10 million on a budget. It's not a one-size-fits-all channel. It has to be bespoke to the business strategy of the advertiser, and you can't learn to swim from the banks.
So I would just before you go,
Sure.
I would agree with a lot of that. I would say it's very different by vertical. So yeah, for CPG, I think it's a lot easier for them to put that 10% of their budget toward mobile because they have very different metrics versus somebody like a JetBlue or somebody who's a little bit more DR, ROI focused. It becomes a little bit more challenging without that measurement piece in place.
No, it depends, definitely. I mean, I would say all the folks that you've mentioned, there is that happy medium, there is that foundation that they have established where they're willing to throw a certain amount of dollars towards mobile, mostly for the investment and to grow the industry. And there is a fair amount of data that they do get back, but I think if you speak to every single one of them, I'm sure that there's some type of measurement. It's not, you know, the come to Jesus measurement that they have, but they do have something there. And I think that that's ultimately, every brand is at a different stage. I think it's ultimately what we're saying, where you have zero measurement whatsoever, so throwing $10 million into mobile is not maybe the best thing. But then there's also putting a measure of measurement across your channels to see, especially for us as an airline, where we don't have this product that you can walk around with, it's a service. So how do we track the effectiveness of something out of home through mobile, through to our desktop? It's hard to do that, but you know, every brand is at a different stage, but ultimately I think moving forward, you know, mobile is maturing, and you know, I think we're past the era of mobile, to be quite honest. I think it's been for a while now. I think it's something that's very, very well established, and I don't think there's an agency out there that doesn't see the value of mobile.
So, and I totally agree. And I think an interesting conversation that, again, so let's talk about measurement in a 360 way. It's the same data would show consumers spend 6% of their time with print media, meaning magazines, and yet that channel is funded at 19 to 20% of a marketer's budget allocation versus 20% of consumer time on mobile, 1% of budget allocation. And I would say mobile is at least as measurable as a page in a magazine, at least, right? And so the delta on the funding and the delta on the consumer time spent, and then all things being equal in terms of measurement, meaning like, I think I reached 25 million people on my print ad. I at least know I reached 20 million people on my mobile ad. That seems to me to be enough to begin to jostle the buckets and start to recalibrate.
Yeah, I'll weigh in on this one too. First of all, in terms of the crappy dating sites I'm on, most of them daily, so I think they're all pretty good. Check them out. From my standpoint, mobile is infinitely measurable. I mean, the mobile is extremely measurable. I think the challenge has been, what is the KPI? What is the metric? I'm the chair of the Association of National Advertisers for the Research Council, and we sit around with other advertisers. Like, what is the one arbiter? So I know from magazine, I know TV because I've been doing it for 50 years. You know, so everybody in the C-suite knows that. That's, if you do that, that's what you get, and that's how you buy, etc. And I don't think there's been a convergence yet in the industry to say, okay, what is the metric that I can use that's an equivalent to Nielsen rate or Nielsen ratings or what have you, that says that if I put that in, that's what comes out. And so in terms of our perspective, even the pilots that we want to do, we want to do them in enough breadth that if I do a pilot and I get a positive ROI, I'm actually making money while I'm doing it. It's not really an incubator. It's not sort of a little test and learn thing. It's like, I'm going to make money when I'm doing it, and I'm going to put a bet against that. And if I can prove it once over here from an ROI, it's very easy for me then to go back and say, give me some more money to put over here, because I just proved it out in physical sales. Now, it does make it a lot easier in the CPG space than, because I've worked in automotive and banking and a whole bunch of different places, but it's a lot easier if I can go down to an individual product. Well, yeah, they scan more KitKat. So it is different depending on the vertical, but I would say that the measurement system, using mobile is probably about as granular from a measurement standpoint of where, when, how, what, how many did you buy, etc., than anything that exists. It's just a matter of the industry getting together and saying, what are the success metrics for that, for the different verticals, and agreeing to that, and then having that bubble up high enough in the organization where people go, okay, well, my scorecard is this, I put money against it, did my mobile work? I can put 10% against it, 15, 20%. You know, I used to run research at Ford Motor Company, and I know that group has gone heavy. I mean, on the automotive side, heavy towards, they disproportionately spend on digital and mobile. And, you know, so there are companies out there that'll kind of make that leap without necessarily having all the T's crossed and I's dotted. But if your company is an organization that's slightly more conservative, that's actually doing well, that makes money on the stuff that they do, there's no really logical reason for them to make a massive jump until they prove it out. You'd be a moron. I mean, honestly, I mean, so the focus for us is, hey, in the last 5 years, we've done really, really well based on our core marketing mix. So at the same time, our management understands and has the vision of, this is where it's going, so go heavy towards it. And when you pilot big, because we want to make sure that we're still ahead of the curve. Not so far ahead, 3 years ahead, where, you know, I spend $100 million on it the next 2 years and no one shows up, but I had enough, so I'm actually, as I'm doing this stuff, I'm making money and learning at the same time. We don't want to just learn for learning's sake. So that's our standpoint from our Hershey perspective. We're heavily in, we're really into it, but when we go, we've got to test, we test big, and it's got to be ROI, we won't reallocate. And until we can figure that out, that's why we work a lot with folks like Catalina and others, just from a measurement standpoint. I only really usually work now on the mobile side with people who can help me measure, did it work or didn't it work? Because otherwise, I'm not, I would love to use mobile as well, to be honest with you, take all the stuff I spend money on TV and amplify that. So I can look at the efficiency of how I drive my TV spend, which is the vast majority of my budget, and by using mobile and spending just a little bit more on mobile, I made that worth 1.5 more times. And that's another way that we're looking at using mobile. So I agree with really kind of everybody's perspective here. I think the measurement side is the hardest bit, and no one's really agreed to what that looks like. ROI is why it's always come back to ROI, because everybody gets that. It's a business metric that people get.
That's what the finance guys.
That's what the finance guys want.